We ready? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so you're going to be my thing
Yeah,
changer.
sure.
Okay, we're just trying to do it. So let me know if you can't hear us because every other room the mic system is not working. And so I said I decided to prepare a few slides so you can track where we are going. But just raise your hands. I won't stop, but if we can, or you can move up front, all the more. Okay, and if you can see from here, I'm not sure. Okay, so thank you all for coming. Um, my name is Priya Sarathi. I have been in analytics, applied analytics for more than 30 years, but working in the corporate life. So really it is about taking theoretical concepts in statistics. I'm an economist by training. So taking it and making sure it fits into the real world in the way it should. And actually, I met somebody who said, "Hey, what does economics have to do with data science?" And I said, "It's got everything because it brings the human element, it brings the system element about where you're applying in the area, in the environment that you're applying. You need to think about those elements before you actually pick a tool, pick a methodology, and all that." So healthcare to me is very relevant in that space. It has people, it has systems and institutions all working together. And so doing analytics and making it smart, you really have to keep those elements in mind when you decide what you want to design, how you want to frame your problem with respect to the environment. So today we wanted to talk a little bit more about AI and how are you optimizing AI rules and creating healthcare systems that are smarter. So can we so that being said, that's the topic of the conversation. I wanted to introduce the other speakers. So Louis, I'll start with you. You can talk loud.
Yes, my name is Louis Luengestorn. I'm a lead data scientist at Highmark Health. Um, and my background is actually operations research, although nowadays, like most people with data science titles, most of my work has been machine learning at Highmark. And then when Gen AI came out a couple years ago, some of us were given the job to look at generative AI and basically see how does it work and more importantly, how does it fail. Highmark Health, our view of where all analytics fit in, uh, we have our part of our strategy document says we believe our healthcare system in the United States is broken. It doesn't work for payers. It doesn't work for providers. It doesn't work for the people we serve. And if we're going to try to change the way we work, working with data and these models is going to have a large part in how we design a different kind of system.
Thank you. And we'll come back to Louis a little more to kind of dig down into that career part of it. So, Deepti.
Hi, my name is Deepti. I'm a senior data engineer at Vigersoft and work for a pharmacy client Gift Hill. But apart from that, I have a personal element to this particular discussion because last year I was diagnosed with a kidney failure and recently I got a transplant. And that entire experience has changed the way I look at the data now because I am now a part of a data. That entire experience showcased me the different gaps existing, how the systems are misconnected, and I had been kind of suffered a lot due to that that we are going to discuss further in the discussion.
Rar?
Hi, I'm Abrar, currently working as an advisor application designer at Gavel Technologies, a healthcare firm which provides services and products to state health agencies. I started my career as a systems engineer, primarily focusing on the data aspect, building pipelines from ingesting the data from the source to the data warehousing, and enabling it for data visualizations to work on. Slowly, I transitioned my role into data analytics, where I've been curious about how data can tell a story and whatnot. Now, currently at my role, I manage a team of data engineers and data analytics, where we build products for healthcare state gov clients like prior authorization, OPI analysis, and payment integrity and whatnot. So we'll talk more about the next few minutes.
So I'm trying to spin a story here. I need you to walk with me. The reason why we have this diverse panel is one, initially Deepthi came to me with her story, and she represents to me the human element, the consumer, the patient who is interacting with the healthcare system. So those are the pain points you first have to listen to. Whereas then you have to visualize the problem. That's where Abrar's role in technology comes in, is how do you, could we have visualized this problem ahead of time and reacted to it? And that's where the visualization piece is very key, because in the healthcare system, one, there's skills, diversity of skill sets. There's also diversity of time available to study data. And so that to me is the portal, the UI UX of what the healthcare system needs to operate. And of course, the brains behind the whole thing is, do we have the data? How do we use the data to support this? Is where Louis' role comes in as a data scientist. So we're going to be going back and forth in across these triangular of storytelling and points of view to kind of show you smarter healthcare systems. They need all three. So to say the words. Okay. So I'm going to go through. You can go through. All right. Okay. So several questions that we're going to try to tackle. If there are any students in here, I wanted to focus a little bit on the career journeys from where and how. And you can actually. This is where we're going to focus more of the time on the system readiness, and then we'll bring back kind of the human dimension of the story that we started off, and go to the success measures and reflections. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So I want to start off. When I met the panelists, they had diverse areas where they come from. So you heard a lot from Abrar, how he came to what he is. I want to start with Louis. You started off industrial engineering, right?
Yeah.
And now you're in healthcare. How did the journey happen?
Okay. So my OR journey, and so I was one of those people in college had no clue what I was going to do with life. So the way I approached college, actually, I became an EMT, an emergency medical technician, while in college. And so looking and going through the engineering curriculum, we had this opportunity to say, we were basically given a journal review assignment, and I found an ambulance article. And that kind of like told me, yes, you can go through this pathway of math modeling in healthcare, again, which is what I did in my free time. And then going kind of like further on, yes, the department is industrial engineering. I was definitely on the more mathematical side, which gets to be operations research. And post PhD, I did a mix of logistics and public health. And then I was recruited to go to University of Pittsburgh because we got started doing a lot of work with the VA hospital system. And the lead on that wanted somebody who had a research background but could actually implement things. And so that's how he got me. And that's how I ended up back into the research and back into this world. And so even my academic career was always working in the healthcare system. And there are many points of entry at that stage. Yeah.
Okay, Deepthi, you said you were a data point.
Yes.
Now. And you are right now working in developing software, and I think you also will talk about some of your initiatives later on. How did the journey happen? So leaving the experience part as a data point, how did you go from where you were to where you are today?
So I actually did my undergrad in India in engineering, and as was mentioned, even at that point, I did not know what to do. So I started talking to a few seniors of mine who were working in the data space. So I thought that might be a very cool thing to do, because I was not very good with the programming. I was the person who was running the different all the extracurricular activities in my college, and then this data got me interested in, so I started looking out for roles and worked in India for a few years before moving to masters in Purdue. And the Purdue's experience actually shaped me where I am right now, because it got me exposed to new technologies and encouraged me how to look beyond what I'm doing to the what lies 5 years down the line. And when I was going through this entire journey last year, because of the learnings I had received at Purdue, I thought, why not actually, what problems I was seeing, why not I develop some solutions using my technical skill set? I know I'm a technical engineer, I know coding very well. Why not I start building some software along that?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Abrar, so how did you end up in the healthcare system and that shaped your focus?
Yeah, so when I started, right, before AI came into picture, there was BI, business intelligence, which was very famous, just like AI is right now. But um, when I was in the got landed a job in BI, my focus was building these data-driven solutions, data-driven applications and projects. I got an opportunity to work across multiple retail signs, and then suddenly an opportunity comes into my door where I met someone at a conference, and he said, "Well, I work at healthcare. There's something that we are doing similar to what you're doing at Walmart and Target. Can you join us and build this data pipeline?" So that's how I landed in the healthcare space. It was an opportunity at a conference, but for me, that was a great thing. It was a turning point. Ever since I joined a healthcare company, I've been there with the company for the 11 years now. It's very hard for me to now move out of healthcare. Leaving that aside, right, data is something which is very critical, and in of any of the business operations, they call it data is a new oil. You just have to refine it, right? How you build those pipelines, how you improve the quality of data and make sure it's readily available to use, for the application to consume and produce the business insights is really key. There's a gap between how the data looks in the raw, and then how you build it to make it actually actionable insights, is what I do, where I build the data pipelines and data analytics solutions.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Should we just move the slide? So before we get into those questions, I wanted to kind of make sure we are clear. I'm a practitioner, quote unquote, 30 years in corporate life. And things that I found that make or break any kind of application are three things: the data itself, the foundation for AI. And it'll be amazing when you kind of actually go and talk to companies how much diversity there is in the maturity of handling data. And you may have a big university, a big hospital that knows what the data is, but when it comes to delivering the data for maybe a dashboard in one other kind of use case, you find there is no connection, more interoperability. So the ecosystem, which is a platform's process of how you take the data and channel it through the AI to deliver it to the right place in the right time, that becomes very, very critical in making a smart system, smart healthcare system. But the most important, I think, is the people, the culture. I mean, we talk about AI fluency and we talk about adoption. It's no point having a scheduling system that is there in the front desk if the person is not trained to use it or doesn't know what issue is going to happen if some changes have to be made to a patient schedule. So these three are going to be very critical. So I'm going to kind of walk through the panel and ask them, what do you think, and from your lens, is most critical in the where you are working, in the field that you're working, and then what if is there something broken or is there an opportunity that you could fix? So I don't want to be very negative about this because something broken means there's an opportunity for us to go fix it. So I see that as two-way street.
Yeah, like you talked about, yeah, building that data-driven culture is really important, um, where people can rely on data, and the end consumers like hospital systems and clinical staff and administration, they trust the data itself, right? Bad data provides uh, um, bad results, and it loses the trust in between. The quality of data then comes into picture where, when you're building those data-driven solutions, the quality have to be top notch, right? And then we have to have those KPIs to measure those qualities across the board, so that the trust remains the same. And as you go along, right, you, there is predefined data driven solutions already available for different catering for different departments. Like a dashboard can work for a provider, but the same dashboard may not be the same relevant to a clinical staff or an admin staff, right? So building those data line of businesses and having those quality checks across the board from the uh, from the from the way we get the ingestions into the source data and to making it readily available in the data warehouses and data lakes is really key.
Can I ask you a question? When you talk about data that is fragmented in the healthcare system, what are we talking about? What is the magnitude or the diversity
Yeah.
of the data that is fragmented?
Yeah, data in healthcare comes in different varieties. It can be a audio file from a transcript from a doctor. It can be a medical um, handwritten note. It can be the actual data itself about the diagnostic results. It can be a radiology image. It can be any sort of data. There's huge different data types that we get when we ingest the data into any IT system, right? So for us to consume the data and make sure it has a layer where it can be used for building applications is really key. So that's where data fragmentation plays a key role in defining. And so for us to enable that, right, we have to build data metadata where you tag the data features to the data itself. You build ABC controls, which is audit balance controls, where you mm, measure the data that landed into your system to to by the end of it, when it's ready for consumption, the data quality is remaining same and it's not changing the shape, right? And different data silos where different departments use different data, right? So we have to make sure all are using the same version of data and it's single source of truth. So it's not divided and everyone's talking. If they talk about the claim, they're talking about the same claim, right? So
Yeah, thank you. So, Louis, when you talk about the single source of truth, what does that represent to you in your environment as in the insurance industry,
Okay.
and how do you kind of deal with it, or is that
Yeah.
not an issue you're facing today?
Oh, yeah, no, it's definitely an issue because you definitely get to see it when somebody comes with an Excel spreadsheet saying, "Here's my analysis. It doesn't match the dashboard you folks produced, and why is that true?" And then you look at their data and it's not, they don't match. Um, at Highmark, we have hundreds of databases, and so when we talk about single source of truth, we want every database to have an owner. And by owner, I don't mean the database administrator. I mean the subject area person that created data. They own the data. And every one of these hundreds of databases has that owner. And we can and the metadata that we have. So we have a database of databases. um, and we maintain that point of contact because we need to know, um, well, one, what is it? Because if you're not in that field, you actually don't know their acronyms, and of course, all the field names are acronyms. Um, you need to know why it's made. So I tell people, especially academics, I have never ever seen a clean data set unless it's been already used by an analyst. Now, that analyst could be an accountant, so the financial data is actually pretty good. But if it's otherwise, you basically had to have an analyst who had to use that data for a purpose, and they cleaned it for that purpose. And so yeah, so when we talk about single source of truth, you need to find out who that was and what have they used this data for. Because if I'm going to use it, it really needs to be somewhat at least close to what they used it for, or else I have to clean it again and clean me to be fit for purpose.
But what are the different types that you have to deal, because yours is a different
Ah,
approach, because you're
okay.
going to be building that AI
Okay.
mechanisms and too. So
Right.
one, what
We
is
have
the
that.
kind of data source we're talking about that you have to deal with
Yes.
to make
Right.
sure upstream the data quality kind of fits into your
Right.
challenges on that?
Yeah, I guess insurance, it tends to be, again, it's textual, numeric data. The insurance, the healthcare provider side will have other things, but we definitely don't. We probably rely on interpretation rather than raw material. So interpretation. So for example, X-rays always have a radiologist interpretation. So that's the easy part, and that's probably actually where we are right now. We're not at the point where we are having AIs look at images and working with them. We can try it. We have lots of trials on that. But when we work with the docs, that's probably not what we're going to rely on. We're going to rely on their texts first. But we have many sources, and then each of them comes from that domain, and the domain has already somewhat just chosen what's the best way of representing the data. Yeah.
Okay, so we're coming to Deepti in the end only because she has seen the little gaps in the data from her experience, and so we want to kind of identify what did you see as gaps in data or the process that led you to where you are today.
So basically, after transplant, I started having different complications. So I was going back and forth between hospital and home. So once there was a case happened, one of my lab results was coming abnormal. I was told to repeat the test 3 days in a row. They were not coming normal, and on the third day, I got a call from my care team. They told me to reach the hospital within the 2 hours because your lab results are not normal. I started getting anxiety. I did not know what's happening, and since I had a transplant, I was under fear if my body is rejecting kidney and I might have to go back on dialysis. These were my actual emotions that time. Nevertheless, I called my friend, reached the hospital on time, but I did not got bed for 30 hours at a stretch. And being a new person altogether with a new kidney and too much care things and all told to me when I was discharged initially, and now what was happening was entirely opposite of it. I was like, I wish they could have actually checked somewhere that even before calling me, is there a bed for me available or not? I wish in that case AI and better scheduling, better decision system could help the doctors to make the experience more
Seamless.
Exactly.
More of a UI. The UI was missing. I think. Do you think that was a data issue or just a process issue or all three?
I think it was a combination of all three from my side.
We can take it from there. So the problem then is we have these broken opportunities that you have stated or what you have experienced. What in your sense, I'm going to post this out, is needed to make that shift to being AI ready? Because we're trying to work on smarter systems, smarter healthcare systems. For example, I have two examples posted here in that, Microsoft has this tool called ambient AI, which is documenting. So AI is applied to different areas. And this was just the documenting the notes of 13 million physicians. And I think that is critical because you would say when I go to a doctor's appointment, they spend so much time typing away. So to have the solution that you're talking to is capturing our notes and transcribing them, so the doctor is kind of reviewing, making those point checks from the human in the loop to where it can be provide useful feedback. So even before I leave the appointment, my summary statements is in my PIC system, because it's all there. It does help because I'm hoping that allows and relieves the physician to spend more time with you and kind of help you with diagnosis. The same way the Mercy Health system has introduced Copilot. So there is a lot of effort that is being put in, but is it integrated behind the scenes? One really doesn't know, and that's why I was going to start with Louis and say, how do you think, how AI ready is the industry? Okay. You don't have to talk about Highmark specifically.
Okay.
We want to protect the companies out here. Okay. But what is your view of the industry from an AI readiness?
And this is definitely going to be very general, but I think everybody in a non-academic place is going to recognize what I'm about to say. Here at Informs, we like to say that the purpose of analytics is to make better decisions. And that idea that the whole point of all of this activity, all of this math, is to drive a better decision. Now, the world as a whole, when they talk about data, we think about just looking at it. And so we have lots of dashboards, for example, out there, and they don't get used. And when you start talking to the people who are supposed to be using them, one thing that they were never asked is, what decision are they going to make? How do they make that decision? How can a data analysis help them make that decision? And so that is a huge disconnect, and and probably I think one of the big reasons that there are many studies with many points of view that say effectively we have an 80 to 90% failure rate in data projects, and I don't get it, and they all have different definitions of what a data project is, but y'all end up at that 80 to 90% failure rate, and a lot of it is just you haven't decided how this analytical project fits into a decision making process. Um, and so at that point you're kind of done. It's a very in that sense you're not even started talking about maturity.
Okay. So the need for having an actionable decision as an
Yes.
outcome
Yes.
is kind of a sense of metric or a measure
Yes.
of how good you have done a job before you have, from the data to the applications to the
Right.
usage.
Yes. Otherwise, what you've done is you made something pretty. If you
Anybody
can't make a
have
decision.
similar experiences? How many of you feel that we are all AI ready in the healthcare system? Or in your experiences? No, no comment discreetly. So, Abrar, from a visualization, Louis said a lot of different dashboards. How do you use them? And nobody's using them. So the decisions are not being made against those dashboards. So what do you think is a key component that's missing when we have the technology to make the visualizations? We know how we framed our problems and capture the right metrics that will give the value of who was using that. So what is not happening that the visualization is overwhelmed by, it's like death by data, it's death by reports or visuals.
Yeah, one thing Louis mentioned about user adoption, right? So, I mean, you build a dashboard which is really cool and it has all the metrics that are very useful metrics and gives you insight, but there's no user adoption because you actually didn't get a buy-in from the users for using, right? Identifying these users, identifying those business operations that need uh, those reports, right? And actually catering to their day-to-day operations and embedding these dashboards into their workday, right? So that will help the adoption of these dashboards, and it will also speed up the process and help them trust the data and the IT systems behind it. Um, and also, key component is the data quality itself. We, from our side, we have to build that trust that they can give us a buy-in into those adoption. They might start using dashboard and say, okay, it's working well, and if I expand this to 6 months to 3 years of time frame, then the report shows off, right? So building that trust is really important. Having those data quality checks and building those KPIs which measures at every stage of data journey is really important. And most importantly, I think getting a buy-in even before you start the development of the dashboards, and also give them an opportunity to do ideation where you give access to the system and tell them that, okay, import a Excel file of 100K records and do analysis and tell us what you need, and we'll try to build a system that will automate this process with more real-time data. So building these tools, right now we have tools like Tableau, business objects, and Power BI that helps us ideation. um, so giving them access is really easy, and they really like it. It's like Excel on steroids. They're moving away from Excel and they're going into these systems where they can just drag and drop and build this.
So I heard fluency, awareness. And for ideating and prototyping, you have these tools that traditionally are user friendly, which Louis doesn't like because it's like each one taking the data and interpreting to what they want. But it's a good way to ideate and decide. I really think this metric measured this way will deliver value for me to take a decision. And so that's almost like a test bed of ideas and prototyping, but that needs to kind of also be taken into production at the enterprise level. So we definitely not arguing that it has to come from a single source of truth, but but the by doing that, you're building awareness and also a vested interest in the visuals so that you don't end up, as Louis said, all these dashboards that are not used.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of need to clean the cupboard once a year, cleaning of these reports. And I think that used to be a problem in any enterprise, especially in healthcare system. As you're given access first to the data, you started developing your reports, and then each one had a report. In my experience, it all came down to an institution where finance was the ultimate authority. So whatever they say goes, but you interpreted what your customer was, your patient was. Is that the patient active patient or inactive patient? Those things make a difference. Each one has a different metric of unit of counting. So if you have all these dashboards, you didn't feel comfortable deeply with the experience that you had.
Yeah.
That dashboard was not making a difference for you.
Exactly. If the dashboard was working, I could have actually got the bed, and I did not had that stupid experience, which felt me kind of restless, and on top of that, adding mental problems now.
So what do you think would have helped you? So we see you going into the place, you have the call, and you go in, and you're saying, okay, I need a bed, and you're saying, I don't have the bed. What kind of devices or reports do you think would have been, or tools would have helped your experience be made better?
So if I look from the data point of view, I see that in that particular case, we have data coming from the labs. That was a key point. Second, we see data coming from the hospital itself on how many beds are available for a particular case, like for the emergency case. And then second, from the scheduling department. I wish all these could have been combined together to give an holistic picture, like if the patient with this result is getting admitted, are we actually ready to accept him, or we can direct him to another facility of ours or a neighboring hospital, because this is a critical situation. And also, like if the abnormal result could have been flagged earlier in the picture, that we are going to need a bed for her.
So do you think the issue is maybe they had the data, maybe they had the reports, but maybe it was not all together for somebody to make a decision? So going back to the actionable decision piece, it may be the data was there, it was accessible, the reports were there, the alerts may be not there, but it was not.
It was not stitched together. If I would have to put it in the simple words, we need to stitch them all together to help them make a better decision.
Which reminds me of a point that you made, Louis, in our discussions earlier about building that structure for telemedical,
Telehealth.
telehealth. Sorry, I'm gonna.
Yes.
And also you made a point that you as the insurance really do see all that information together. So that's kind of one of the services your company does provide.
Okay, so when we talk about the healthcare system in the United States being broken, one of the reasons of that is there are very many players, and they're all nominally independent of each other. You'll have your personal care provider who has their practice in their community. You have hospitals, and this might not be very well known, but doctors don't work for hospitals. They actually, at most hospital systems will have a parallel organization of the doctors, and that's who the doctors work for. The doctors are nominally independent of the hospital. And then you have the fact that you have specialists who are, again, all nominally independent. You have call centers within the hospital. Some of them are actually in the part of the hospital, some are not. Okay, so you have lots and lots of players. And the insurance company, and I'm going to be slightly optimistic and say working on behalf of the patient, who is our member, we get to see all of this. And so traditionally in the United States, the relationship between payer and provider is very antagonistic, and our members is not much better. Okay, so I think we believe that maybe because we see everybody, I mean, we see every provider because we get all the bills. We see the member and all their activities because they send us all the claims. They send us what their activities are. So maybe we can try to put a coordination system in there. Again, recognizing the fact that all these entities are nominally independent of us. can we put a coordination or make it even at least possible for coordination to be in place? If someone, like, we would like that for our personal care providers, or perhaps what Optum calls an anchor provider. So that's a specialist that basically owns the episode of care. Or, again, recognizing everybody's independent, they can own the episode of care and maybe quarterback the whole thing. And so that's something that we want to, and that's something that doesn't exist. Everything I just said does not exist, but we would like it to. And maybe we can try to change our relationship with our provider partners and our members so that we can make that happen.
Okay, go to the next slide. So that is where we were talking about what is broken. So I'm kind of moving down next to what are the solutions from an opportunities that AI has to solve some of these problems. So can we get one more slide here? Because I sat through a lot of sessions this time in forms and kind of have a sense of what is being done. But this is work in progress. There are smart solutions to the broken system. You have scheduling is a big issue. That's where OR really comes in optimizing how many patients, the beds, the surgery, rotations. There's also patient-centric about the drug, the use. There was, I think, one of the PhD students posted on diabetic and what the causes are. Financial management, that's where companies like insurance companies play a very dominant role. All this is there, so there is smartness. The systems are smart, AI is being used. So the question therefore becomes, how would you use AI to solve? And so we have few questions, few problems that you all have raised. In your area, how are you using AI? How are you using AI to solve some of those broken links? Louis?
Okay, so one thing you remember, again, we're at Informs, and our backgrounds on the math side are quite varied. And all these disciplines, so we're talking about optimization, simulation, and queuing. We have machine learning, and now we have generative AI, which is a variation on that. And they all look at problems very differently. So we have all these tools. So a lot of these problems exist in operations management, to use our terminology, is an operations management problem context. And we want to start there because so one of the reasons we use AI is we don't understand our system. And in terms of human beings are hard to understand, biology is hard to understand. So healthcare is pretty hard too. So that's where the AI comes in. But to the extent we can, let's understand our how we operate, because we've had hospitals in the United States for a couple hundred years. We have a lot of history. We should know something about how hospitals work. But it becomes overwhelming. Like, so we're talking about all of the data sets. So to do the full hospital thing, you're looking at who's in your beds right now, who are your surgeries getting scheduled. You're looking at an emergency department, which is unknown because it's an emergency department. And all that feeds into what is my hospital going to look like in 2 hours or 2 or 4 hours. And you can put all that into a dashboard, but it's completely overwhelming. So you start using AI as a way of doing a first round of interpretation, or perhaps a warning that basically, and we were talking about earlier, a warning like that says, here is something that you need to pay attention to, and let the human take the time to figure out the dashboard now that they're looking for something specific. So you can use AI to help you take a very complex set of data elements and monitor all of them, because that's a large cognitive load it's really hard to do on an ongoing basis.
So it's like,
Yeah.
If you're sitting in the traffic control room and
Yeah.
you have all the traffic cams and all the intersections, you have at least minimum of 3 to 4 traffic cams. And imagine a human sitting in a room trying to study the intersection more, even 2 intersections constantly, 24/7. So it's a fatigue. The human has fatigue of not just ingesting all this information, but then processing and reacting to it. So from an AI point of view, what you're suggesting is have some kind of not an override, but like a service that uses AI to look through it, identify predefined trigger alerts, thresholds, to kind of tell
Or
the
yeah,
guy, okay,
yeah,
this person, admin, you're responsible for this, react
yes,
to it.
yeah. So you can basically have an operations management model of your
Model, yeah.
hospital with all the parts, but you can have an AI kind of like watching over the model and saying, this is where we're going, and your hospital people are all kind of busy doing what's going on right now, especially if you have a full hospital. They have lots of things to do, but the AI can keep track of the whole thing, and perhaps so for example, discharges, you should have an operations management analysis of your discharge process to speed up as much as you can. But you can also have an AI to say triggers. Here are patients that are probably um, close to or potentially able to be discharged. Now the they're not discharged because the doctor is kind of like doing all of his things in cycles. But if you identify, we have patients that are almost ready to be discharged and we have a full hospital, we can change the doctor's priorities and perhaps open up another bed. And so AI can do that monitoring stuff because again, the doctor has the last word.
Yeah.
But we can flag with an AI.
So going back to you, Abrar, where do you think the opportunities are, and how are industry being using this to integrate better data quality and trust?
Yeah, so there are many aspects. I'll talk about data discovery first. So data discovery, as soon as the data lands into the ingestion layer at any company, right? The AI tools can use data discovery tools to actually look at the data, scan through the data, and form the initial semantic layer where it can categorize the data, claims data into claims tables, and medical data into tables, and pharmacy into pharmacy, and make it ready for the ideation to start immediately, right? Rather than waiting for it to cleanse and go through different processes and eventually land in data warehouses and data lakes to start building the applications. So that is one thing. And data metadata, where you enable the tags on the data itself so that we can track the data as it comes along and goes through the different pipeline, right? And data lineage, where you tie the claim that is the in an application to the source file that we received on a we received a monthly file, and it was uh, part of that file where that record was captured in that data source, right? We don't know what made that huge difference in that report, right? There's a claim that came in, like there's a 100K claim, and that's an anomaly in that dashboard that is throwing off the graph altogether. But we don't know where that came from, right? We using the data lineage and data metadata, you can track it to the source, and you can actually confirm whether it's actually a data anomaly, or it's actually a scenario where there was a claim that was shoot off, right? Building these different solutions, and also when the data is flowing from different systems, from source files to tables to warehouses and data lakes, right? There are pipelines, right? You have to build self-healing pipelines where the data fails because there's a data type mismatch or whatever. It has a capability to identify the data types and self-heal without having the MNO teams, the maintenance and operations teams and production support coming into picture and solving the problem, and right, having those data healing pipelines would be really good. So all this can be where we can use AI.
Thank you. Thank you. Deepti, you talked about things that you reacted to and you ended up creating solutions.
Yes.
Could you give us an example of what you ended up working on, if you, on
Oh,
your use
sure.
cases that you
So I'm actually going to give a lightning talk on that tomorrow. So based on my experience, I came up with, okay, this is the data we need, and this is the KPI that actually needs to be monitored, and we need to predict and make the decisions around these metrics. So I designed a solution which will help the hospitals plan the admission rate and understand how many beds are needed, how many staff are needed, how many resources like ultrasound machines or MRI machines are needed once a patient gets in. So I started with the first layer, which talks about what is happening in the hospital right now and giving the real time insights. Second, I needed a predictive layer, which talks about different KPIs and metrics like admission rate or billing anomalies, which Abrar has mentioned, which was predicting that based on different mathematical models as well as simple machine learning models. At third layer, we needed our decision layers. That's where the optimization comes into the picture, where I can apply the what's happening right now to what is going to happen to make a decision around that. Suppose in the next 12 months, I'm anticipating a rise in the patients to 10%. How do I plan my resources accordingly? How many beds I'm going to need in the future? Because my current infrastructure is not supporting my upcoming needs. So
So this in market is
it's
productized.
we
It's
are in
like
the
going there. So it's
we are in the process of productionizing it. In fact, Vinay is here to represent that. So we are still in that process.
well, wonderful. So basically, what this is kind of what the I takeaway from that was you have to use your pain points, the challenges, that is a very human related issue that you identify to create the solution that's appropriate. That framing the problem, framing the participants of the problem become very critical before you can identify what solution, leave alone what data. The data is an issue. You can say, yes, we have the data. Can we get it? So I know you had some thoughts on how to frame problems or in your way of designing your solutions. Louis, did you want to kind of expound on that a little bit?
Okay. Yeah, so this is again for the informed people on the practice side of things as opposed to the academic side of things. We talk a lot about framing the problem, meaning what is the decision problem that we need to solve as the most critical thing in getting something that's actually usable, and that's working with the end user. And we have to remind people the end users and the sponsor are different people. So the sponsor is usually the executive that says we want this project. The end user is whoever is actually making decisions that impact the system that you are trying to make better. And you want the analysis to go inside of their decision making framework. In other words, what are your decisions or freedom of actions that can actually solve this problem? Who is actually making those decisions? And we need to drive the right analytics in the format that that person understands at the point of decision. But all that is based on the fact that the analyst has to actually work with that person to understanding their decision-making context.
Yeah. And I would kind of expand that because now we have a lot of Gen AI stuff coming in.
Yes.
Because your decisions are getting delivered by another layer that is going to be user friendly to the people with
Right.
diverse skills. So you have to kind of also consider the other side, who's going to use them, how are they
Yeah.
going to consume. So even though this is your person in charge of management, operations management, talking to Louis and saying, hey, this is what I want, this is how I want it. But the person who's going to be using that may be the admin who's in charge of the scheduling for operations facilities or whatever,
Yeah.
or the bed allocation. And so that again is another layer to involve those stakeholders or at least do a test scenario of what are the use cases from that.
So,
okay,
a little bit
go
of a follow up. So we have a bunch of projects where, again, we those of us who have been here, okay, we understand analytics. Our analytics has outputs. Our analytic outputs are sometimes really hard to understand, and so we've had some success using generative AI as an interpreter. And so what we'll do is we train generative AI to take an analytics output and then explain it in terms that the end person can understand. And sometimes it's as simple as um, this is true, therefore this is a warning, and the end person has to investigate. And sometimes it's actually much more of what you think is a human understandable interpretation, a narrative interpretation. But so that is definitely the other side of using advanced analytics, having these results interpretable by the person who has to use them.
it's another layer of complexity. How many of you use speech to text on your generative LLM models when you're building and coding? You kind of talk to your modules, Claude, or whatever you use. I used to talk to my chat GPT nowadays. I don't write. So it does a better job of writing than me, actually. Any of you use the
I mean, you don't need to use speech. There are certain hotkeys, like backslash backslash. It will write the whole code.
Yeah.
You accept it or not accept it. So I mean, there are a lot of shortcut keys.
but I do know the shortcut keys.
Yeah.
I'm not a coder.
Just,
I used to be a coder, but not anymore. So
there
those,
are IDEs like
yeah,
Cloud
yeah.
Code and
Yeah. With Claude too, I'm like, yeah, I need to talk to you, tell you I need to you to design this program in Python for the. But I don't know if that. I think you also told me you're starting Gen AI projects, red teaming, right? You're doing some kind of red teaming in your.
Okay, so what?
She go to
So
the
one of the things I had to do, well, that we did is when working with Gen AI is learn how it fails, and so we found a few failure modes. So what, for example, one thing that we find again, we like to think that we're different than our competitors, insurance companies. In particular, we like to think that we have a different strategy and it matters. So sometimes when we use a generative AI on projects and we start looking at the answers we didn't like, and we started realizing it was giving us answers that would make complete sense to our competitors. There's a consulting group that's in the exhibit hall, and what they have found is he's seen that problem before, and he calls it a generic problem. That when you give it questions, it gives you the answer that is good for the general world. And he has a problem when he has a client that is peculiar for its industry, because he runs into the same problem. It keeps on giving answers that make sense for every other company in this industry, but not itself. So we tend to find things like that. So that's one kind of error we find. And then of course there's anytime we do a generative AI, especially a quantitative type project, we do a full round of especially experimental design and test it, a full test suite. And then we end up finding the fact that the generative AI randomness ends up putting an upper limit on accuracy, because just the sheer randomness of output. And that's something that we show people because we want to make sure that people know what kind of mistakes Gen AI makes in their field, in their domain. And so they have the proper level of skepticism.
Yeah, thank you. You need to add this Gen AI layer, one more layer, UI layer in your product.
Yeah,
We were
I
just
know
talking
that.
about that earlier today.
We already got a good building block. And to add to that point, actually, even when I use ChatGPT and Claude Code to do a lot of the coding work, so the more you give the context around the problem, the better it gets at giving the responses. And in fact, in one of the things I was doing on the backside was like training these models. So try to take a bigger model and make us train it into a smaller language model, so that I don't get the errors you were mentioning. In fact, in fact there have been cases it hallucinates a lot, and I have been a tester for the deep learning few of the AI courses myself, so I know how these systems are designed.
Excellent. So which is what?
We have a design partner. Just maybe go to Louise and have them test our model.
Yes, there you go. Make the connection here. That is why I wanted to bring in the human dimension of AI. If you go to the next slide, please. I just try to capture as many people, persons, agencies on this. So there's a lot of things going on out here. And I would really like to just tell Claude or tell whatever that, hey, just go and integrate these things, bring them together, find the right keys. Oh, my job would be so much simpler, but that's not happening in the near future yet. We can take each one, and you really have to be the human in the loop to go make sure that you're connecting the right pieces, which your company is able to do because they have access to many of these components, each of you. But from a data point of view, how are you responding abroad to the fact that there is so many different personas, key IDs with all these different people? And is that making a difference to how you are going into visualization, setting up these value metrics or selecting them?
Yeah, when integrating AI into healthcare system and healthcare data, right, the compliance come into picture where HIPAA compliance and GDPR. Um, um, it's it's a new system, and there is a lot of concern about putting the healthcare data onto the AI tool. So that's when Gen AI comes into picture, where it can generate the data using the sample data. If you provide a sample data, mass data, with hiding the key PHI and PI information, it can generate the data and give you a sample data closer to the data that we have in our system, and we can use that to do analysis. And once you build the system, then you can build a localized models that can integrate with data and give you right outputs, right? So security is a big problem, and there are huge penalties if you breach security in HIPAA compliance, CMS, Medicare, Medicaid compliance, and also the GDPR coming into picture. Um, Using AI to create that ideation using sample data would solve a lot of time and and learning, and then you can use that learning to reinforce the same methodology in your local AI models that can help you speed up the healthcare application.
So I'm going to take you from your company where you're working right now, and I'm going to put you into another company that is working with all the things around. You can't see it, but
Yeah.
it's like you have the manufacturing, the people providing stuff into the healthcare systems. What is your one advice that you would say that from a human point of view, what would you do if you had to build that from ground up differently from a data with what you just talked about?
Yeah, data is the new oil, they say. Right? You have to refine the data so that it gives you better outputs. Right? Focus on your data. Make sure you have right strategies for data, and that will drive your business operations. So that's one thing I'll stress upon. The more cleaner, more better data that you have, will give you better business strategies to work with.
So, what were the questions that you would ask of your new customers? I just changed your customers on you.
Yeah. So I think the KPIs is important. What do you want to rate? Before I build anything, right, I want to know. I don't want to search for user adoption. I want users to come and adopt our products. Right. So I want to know what you want to see, and what is your blockers or pain points in your day-to-day life and business operations, and then build data and systems according to that. Right. So that it will bridge the gap between the IT and the business operations, and help them speed up their day-to-day work life.
So, Louis, the question for you was on what were the challenges that emerge when you're modeling digital versus in-person care for telehealth staffing?
Okay. Yeah. So in healthcare, first you always have to understand what kind of problem are you trying to solve. So the telehealth, the challenge we're trying to solve is access. The reason you're doing telehealth is because you have resources, and because of economies of scale, they have a tendency to be centralized in big cities. Okay, so I'm in Western Pennsylvania. That big city is Pittsburgh. But the people who need this care are scattered throughout. So rural area, rural healthcare, and so first you're trying to understand what problem you're trying to solve, and it's an access problem. It's not really a cost problem, because everybody's going to want to be paid the same. But the access problem is a big deal because if you are not in commuting distance of the main city hospital, a visit is equivalent to 2 days of work, and that's really expensive on the patient. So that is the problem we're trying to solve. And so when we talk about telehealth, it means that you need a way to get data from wherever the patient happens to be over to wherever the doctor in question has to be. And so you're talking about a full EHR set. You're talking about people accessible to the patient who can work with that patient and get their data into the EHR system. You're talking also about how to a doctor visit isn't just a doctor. It's also the afterwards care. And so that's what nurses and other staff do. All those resources are still needed at the point wherever the patient happens to be. And then we have another problem of in the clinical world we call it patient compliance, as if it was a question of will. It's not. It's also a question of understanding. So how can we give instructions to the patient who's remote from the doctor in a fashion that they understand? So our technical people are good at writing technically correct instructions. Now we need a set that the people can understand. So there's several links in that chain of going from here's a patient, here's a doctor, they're remote from each other, but we still need to get care to that patient.
Are you seeing the use in telehealth of image capture or image analysis to say, hey, your patient is not understanding what you just gave them? Do you have anything? Do you see anybody? Now, maybe not you, but any other institution using it?
Let's see. So in healthcare, we're not doing surveillance on our patients. We definitely don't do that. We do have we do have check-ins. So we have concept. So this is where we're talking about home health. The majority of home health, well, there is a segment of home health that says, I have a clinically trained person that goes to a house and does clinical activities. Okay, so that's one range. There's another range of home health that says, we have given you a patient a treatment plan, and that patient has a support structure around them, like family. We'll visit you and see, how are you doing? Are you following the plan? Okay, because we need to make this a habit. But the problem is, and so this is current state. A problem is you can only do this so often. I don't think anybody again, depending on what's going on, you're talking a week, 2 weeks, months, a month in between. It could be useful to say, can we somehow monitor? So for example, I have a virtual physical therapist, they're physical therapy. And so they have sensors and cameras, and they watch me go through the activities. And they give me feedback.
Hinges,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so you can do the same thing here. So for example, when you're talking about, can you understand the instructions? Well, yes, can we actually film you doing the instructions? And an AI can say, are you doing it right?
And that I think is a privacy issue. That's a big marker.
They won't agree for that
Yeah.
because when I was actually doing my dialysis at home, there was nobody to monitor. So that was a big problem. And anytime I rush into the issue, I have to call Baxter helpline to see that this machine is giving beep, this is giving this error. What do I do now? Because
that's an important question.
Yes.
The reason why I ask that is typically when you do customer support,
Yes.
There's a monitor of how well they do in responding. So we kind of tape the recordings and kind of review where did they not do right, or did they press the first button. But I'm not saying monitoring for the recording for the sake of it, but something that kind of deletes it after the patient interview is over, but it's kind of prompting the person, the physician on the other side, hey, maybe you want to repeat this, so intelligence in that sense. But right.
So in my case, they gave me custom equipment. So
but most customers won't most patients actually won't agree somebody keeping a camera on them. Let me be honest from the patient's perspective.
Absolutely. I did not put the camera on. I did not use the camera for the physiotherapy treatment that I think both of us are probably doing similar, because I felt awkward. But I do see the value in the sense, immediately what do I translate this information to? Especially for you, it was a critical issue.
Exactly.
And so, go ahead. Same.
Yeah, because I actually what when I was doing dialysis, I was knowing that any mistake I do is actually going to cost my life. The
Yeah.
thing at stake was my own life, because any small infection can land me in hospital, and even
Exactly.
I don't know the consequences. But if not at least the image, there can be an AI driven instruction that I can tell the AI that I have tried doing connecting the machine, but this is the error I'm getting. What do I do now? Maybe like it can just prompt me to give a picture of that particular thing instead of filming the entire.
Yeah, maybe it's a device, maybe it's a UI you need that you can talk to that captures it and says translates this into a
Okay.
problem solution. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
I
that
don't want to see
immediately. You
seen
don't need a complete monitoring.
exactly, not a complete but the
Yeah.
partial
So are
monitoring.
you going to build that into your system now because you are passionate about this?
Yeah.
How do you translate passion in, yeah, you know where I'm
Yeah.
going, right? So how are you translating that passion into something useful, something that's targeted as a solution?
For the dialysis machine, which context I was giving, so those are like very critical area, and those fall under HIPAA compliance and GDPR. A lot of regulations come in. So even if I'm proposing a solution right now, the implementation would have many barriers. That's
Just guessing because the human point is so important to consider, and when you talk to users, data point or not, a consumer, there is emotion involved and limitations of how far will you go to share your information with the system that you don't see in front of you. It's not a human. That is a big question that smart AI systems will have to solve at the interface level when they're interacting with customers, patients. So moving on to measuring success, I see we have about 10 minutes left. Abror, what questions would you ask of a client when designing dashboards? I think we touched upon this a bit earlier. So, anything that you would like to add to it?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this. One thing I would like to add to what Louis and Deepthi were talking about, um, telehealth and telemedicine, right? The growth in technology on edge intelligence and IoT, connecting these together and having building those smart devices um, that can help improve the telemedicine altogether itself. Right? One of my relative, right, he um, he's using a pacemaker at home, and every month it sends a report to the physician. Right. So how does it work? You just have to connect that to a Wi-Fi once in a month, so that it can generate and send that report. And all the processing happening on the device itself. That's edge intelligence there, right? Sir? Right. So same thing can be applied to a dialysis machine. Same thing can be applied to an Apple Watch, right? Where you can um, build that system, which is a small scale, even like a small Raspberry Pi processor, which it can run the LLM and process that information, right? And then connect it to IoT so that it can send an email or alert a relative or alert a physician. So having this edge intelligence and IoT would really change the way. And the privacy is not a problem here because, in a way, the processing happening locally on the device, and it's a personal device of a patient, and it's not in a cloud or outside of where
Good point.
it's it's happening, right? So that way you can build those smart systems which are not that expensive because it's local and it's a very tiny device and a very small scale Raspberry Pi kind of a system, right? So that would really change. And then from my data visualization perspective, right, I can create a personal dashboard for that person on the device itself, right, using the data that is provided, right, and send it a monthly report to the patient itself. So you're who you're doing, right, and capture the key biomarkers. They call it blood pressure and the way the pulse rate and all those different oxygen levels, and those are easily capturable using these devices, and building a dashboard and sending you monthly report and weekly report on a need basis would be really change, and it's a more building those personalized care will actually be really
I love
helpful.
it. I love the suggestion. Yeah, and I think that's so good, right? You're minimizing the transmission of data, keeping that more local, but at the same time, you are able to get the reaction from the system, which takes me to you, Deepthi. If you had all these new things, what would be your criteria for measuring success of a smart healthcare system?
The one of the things which actually he's mentioned a lot, given a lot of good ideas to use the wearables and integrate those things, but my success would come in if I actually as a patient try to make my life better. I can actually make a decision. Okay, my blood pressure is shooting up. Can what do I consult to my dietitian or my primary care provider to reduce the blood pressure, because there has been a spike going around on that. My success would be how I can adopt that to make my healthcare journey a much better experience.
So would it be more of doing your self-managed, self-service of
Exactly.
managed care? So less phone calls to your provider or the back office that you were mentioning, to less frantic emotional upset. I don't know how you measure that, but
There are ways to measure the mental health and the anxiety.
Yeah.
There are already some systems in place
right
for
now I'm
that.
saying how you would capture it so it becomes a part of the dashboard. This person, uh, customer patient relationship manager kind of gets a report saying, oh, we have not heard from Deepthi for a long time, so everything must be going well. To me, that's a success. Instead, there's not a complaint. I got 5 calls in the morning, 5 calls later on as a follow-up and backup. So those may be your measures of success.
Exactly. In fact, to add to the point, so when I was on the dialysis machine, so there are actually two types. The one was a manual one, which I did not do, but in that kind of a case, it was difficult to capture. But the automated one, which I was doing, there was a report going to my dialysis center, but what it was not connecting was the calls I am making to the call center of the machine manufacturer.
Yeah.
I wish there was some system in place that could connect both of them.
So also, if those calls have been measured, manufacturer's information may need to be fed back into a system to say, did we successfully manage this patient in a patient care journey? Great, thank you. Louis, to you, the question, I don't know, the question may not be as relevant, but I was thinking that when you reminded me that you work, you have responsibilities. As your responsibilities increase and you have a whole team that's working on finding if things will fail with generative AI. What are the kind of metrics for success are you kind of created as a guideline for your team or the group of data scientists that are working together to provide back to your management who said,
Okay.
let's do this as a test?
Right. So our metrics are always going to be our business partners. So remember, there's really no such thing as an analytics project. All analytics projects are really owned by the business partner. And so the metric of success is how does the business partner improve by the fact that we have this system out there. And so ways to define success, it can be I make a better decision. So a very common version of this is you really needed, this is the interpret analytics report problem. You really need an expert, which we don't have. Does the AI do a good enough job that it gives the end decision maker the information they need to make a better decision than they would have been able to if they didn't have that report, which is what happens now. So that's one version. Another version is going to be, we have a lot of writing projects where Priya was saying, and technical people, subject matter experts, are not good writers, as Priya mentioned. Okay, some people know that, some don't. We have a lot of projects where we use generative AI along with our subject matter experts to help write. Now, the end product is going to go to a senior writer. We have no junior writers, so the generative AI becomes the junior writer. Does that workflow become more smooth because the senior writer can now, the subject matter expert now has this interaction with a junior writer called Gen AI to does the writing get smoother? So that's another version of a metric. How smooth, how easy, and do they get a better product at the end? Another version is are we able to deliver information to people faster? Okay, and at a more frequent rate. So that would be like the hospital dashboard. We will never be able to get an analyst to look at it on an around the clock basis. but an AI can do that every hour. Does that help? So we have to come up with a metric that makes sense in the business context, because it's the business partners owns the project and the measures of success.
Wonderful. That is excellent. So now I think we're kind of coming to the end of our time slots. And so you can answer any one of these three questions. So, one is, what decision should we automate or should we not automate in this journey, especially which is very human dimension, is pretty substantial? Or two, how much AI is too soon in your journey? If it's being used, is it too soon, or do we need it? Should we wait? Any things? So, and my last one was, of course, going to be, what do you think about when you think about AI optimization and healthcare, smart healthcare system? So it's a wide gamut of questions. Pick the one you want. And Abrar, you want to start?
Yeah, I would say let data lead and let AI follow. So data drives those businesses, right? And AI can accelerate, and the new technologies like cloud computing and quantum computing can come into picture and make it easy. But first, the focus should be on data.
I would say, yeah. I would say also problem, right?
Yeah.
Problem to data.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to take up the question, what decisions should not we automate? Because AI will give recommendations, but it should not start forcing the recommendation. Like for me, my lab results are coming abnormal. It should not start immediately telling me, I change my diet, I change my exercise line, or I change my medication altogether. It should just start giving me the warning signs and alerting my care team instead of imposing decisions on either care team on me on that.
So don't. It's a recommender, but you still need the human in the
Exactly.
loop in the end. So
We
don't
need like
automate.
human guardrails in the end to make a final call.
Yeah,
What
so
exactly is
I think we're
needed.
not there mature enough yet to do that last stage, last mile.
We are
of,
not. We're still very far from that.
So on the topic of the decision making, so we have a policy that you are never allowed to blame AI for a mistake, ever. You own the mistake always. And as we do our testing, we know there are certain things about AI. One, the last step of generative AI is a randomization element. You randomly pick from the universe of possibilities. We are not comfortable with having decisions being made at the roll of the dice, which is effectively what that means. Another thing we figured out about generative AI, it doesn't understand mission and values. We see that because, again, we think that we have a different mission and values and strategy than our competitors do. And so we have seen it take things that we think our competitors would have liked, but we don't. It doesn't know our values. And so we say that we will never let generative AI do a decision with consequence. That's not immediately reversible. So, for example, pre-authorizations. We'll have generative AI do automatic authorizations. We are aware that some of our competitors do denials. We will never do that. We will never let Gen AI do the denials. Now, we'll get our value out of it, because if we can do pre-authorizations, that relieves the workload so our humans can handle the hard cases. But we won't let AI do anything of consequence by itself. And that's we have already put that policy out there.
And I think if I were to summarize all that you said, the role of AI has been more of a assistant augmentation to the process that makes you more productive, makes the process more efficient, timely, and delivers what it needs to be. It's almost like the fast train that take you from point A to point B in much faster time than if you took the local train that goes on our tracks. It takes longer. So if it can do that and help you reach your destination faster, your productivity, and I think collaborative. So I would choose the third one. So the two words that I think of, augmentative and a collaborative, as two pieces of what a smart healthcare system using AI can do optimally for now. And then the third one is, don't automate everything before you test it out. So test, and test iterations. My third word with smart healthcare system. Because I think we are not at the AGI level of maturity is going to take a lot. And I was hearing Andre Karpati talk about it. He says it's decades before we get to that stage. For now, we use it as a productive tool. Okay. Well, let's thank the panelists. So, great job. And I'll open it up for questions, Q&A, or we can just network and informally ask the Q&As if you want. But do you have any questions, anybody? Okay.
Yeah. So I've recently been working in AI bias and fairness, if we're still allowed to say that these days. And I was wondering what new or unexpected and not like textbook coverage examples of bias have you found? And then what metrics have you used to gauge fairness and any trade-offs involved in kind of mitigating this bias?
Can you take
Okay.
this up?
Okay, so I think I'm not sure about new versions, but I think this idea of this genericity problem is a lot of the root of it. So the foundation models, so you have to kind of remember the way you attack a data-driven machine learning or AI model is you attack the data. So we talk about the universe of English language text. If it's in the and that's what the foundation models have. It's going to draw from that text. Whatever's in there is going to leak, and I kind of think that it's almost inevitable. I don't know if it's possible to stop it, and we see that again the generic problem that we have. If we think that we have different values than our competitors do. Our competitors as a whole are much bigger than we are, and so in other words, the foundation models are trained on people that we think we don't want to be. And it might not be possible to get rid of that, to change that. I think if I bring this up to an academic, they will tell me about retrieval augmented generation, which is where you give it a library and you tell the AI, this is ground truth, and I want you to use this library. That works when using generative AI as a search engine. But if you're trying to use generative AI in a generative creative context, it needs to use foundation models to interpret the library you just gave it. And at that point, the whole world's biases leak into the answer. So I'm not sure about newness, but I don't think it's solvable.
I want to add to that is, using small LLMs or small data sets within the firewalls of companies is really good, but there's a bias in a sense that me as a person in one department has a certain view, and because it's kind of constantly interacting with that model, if you are the one high frequency, you're kind of building up your viewpoint and your perspective, whereas the next person in accounting may not be the same way, but it's going to have an influence if you have a common model that's not separated.
Yeah, we need actually the models even by the department level. And in fact, when you do the prompting, you can actually, in the backend, you can give that answer in that persona specific to the division, because accounting won't understand the sales world, and sales world don't understand the accounting and the marketing world. You need to add while prompting the AI on the back
So
end.
there is the bias is kind of
The bias is actually true.
I don't know how. Did you have any thoughts or suggestions that you have come across?
Well, I've been trying to look at metrics for actually detecting it, partly more like diagnostic cases, and it's come down to a trade-off for certain metrics. Like for diagnostic cases, you have a misdetection rate.
Yeah.
And the big issue we've looked at, just realizing this, is that some cases for some people with sensitive attributes, it's just harder to detect some disease, or it's just a harder case. And if you have a constrained resource, for a histology lab or something, to ensure everybody has the same
Yeah, I was at a presentation in a different conference where it was on a use case of how do I score and rank the biasness, and they were using a ranking system and to make sure the drift doesn't happen and you have trigger and threshold. So that's the one I've seen is you really can't control it, but you can monitor and try to mitigate and manage it. So that was basically a rank scoring index that they created for that. So.
I have a point to add. Can you actually try adding different prompts as well as controlling the temperature element? Because that's what I actually did in our platform to improve the performance of the model. So that
Also
actually
the
helped.
research that has, I mean, in anything, right? You can tie back to the research. So all this AI works on data structure algorithms and models, right? Basically, there's a methodology and a and a formula that runs and adds more features to it and gives you an output. And the more accuracy it is closer to the real time scenarios, right? A doctor can tell you, looking at the image, that okay, this is a negative report or a positive report, right? So, I mean, taking that sample data and doing the research against a set of data and using different algorithms and comparing those algorithms and tweaking based on the features would really tell you